And the reason being because it has such a unique plot that this is definitely one to dive into and talk about story structure and how it compares and contrasts to other typical stories that we read. Well, hello, everyone. We're going to be talking all about some amazing mentor texts that you can use in your classroom for St. Patrick's Day. And on top of that, I have some amazing graphic organizers that will go with each of the books. Let's jump in. Book number 1 tonight is called Tim O'Toole and the Wee Folk. It is about a man who is with a wife and 2 children. Him and his wife are poor. They've got 2 kids, and he needs to basically go and find money or find work. You can see here, they're showing that he's got 1 little coin in their hand. And so he basically sets off and travels around and trying to find work and things to do. And on his way, he stumbles upon the leprechaun. And as he knows, legend says it, that he who finds the leprechauns gets access basically to their gold. So the leprechauns oblige, and they present him with a goose that can lay golden eggs. So he's super excited. He takes it, and then on his journey on the way home, he stops at a house and stays the night, and they end up switching his goose for another goose. So he goes home. This goose does not produce golden eggs. You can see, obviously, he is upset. His wife is upset, so he sets back out to find the leprechauns again because he's very mad at them, unknowing that the fact that his friends who he stayed the night with on his journey home are actually the ones who switched it. So the leprechauns, very shocked that actually happened, they offered him a second gift, which is a tablecloth of gold. So again, on his journey home, he stays at the same house overnight, and they switch the tablecloth of gold with a raggedy old tablecloth. Or when he gets home, he definitely notices that it's not the right tablecloth and it's not made of gold. So for a third time, he sets out yet again, and this time the leprechauns realize that he is clearly being tricked by somebody else. So they then help him at the very end. They help him trick the old man and woman who keep tricking him, and they end up getting both the goose and the tablecloth back, give them both to the man and his wife, where they are able to have food and wealth for the rest of their lives, and enough where they can even help out the village. So it's a super cute tale. Again, it pairs really well with Jamie O'Rourke. It kind of is the same storyline or plot line. I have paired this book with teaching context clues. So I already have for you a context clue printable that has a lot of great words that your students probably do not know, even your higher students, which is one of the reasons why I love this book so much. Definitely you can use these words, have them go back, have them find their context clues, come up with their definition, etc. Let's go ahead and talk about, of course, probably a lot of yours favorite, Jamie O'Rourke and the Big Potato. Such a classic tale. Who does not love 𝗦ci𝗰𝗶𝗹? Absolutely one of my favorites. So the storyline is very similar to Tim O'Toole and the Wee Folk, like I just mentioned. He has a wife who ends up being sick, and he is a very lazy man. They have nothing to eat. So he sets out in search of anything, basically, like food, work, whatever he can find. And he ends up stumbling upon a leprechaun, of course. And so he knows that the legend says that anyone who finds the leprechaun gets access to his treasure. But the leprechaun convinces him instead to take these seeds and that they would produce the biggest pratty. And so he's so convinced that this is going to solve his problems that he takes it. Well, when he gets back, you can guess his wife is very upset, thinks he has been completely tricked because instead of getting treasure, he got a seed. Well, so he goes out and he does plant the seed, and we all know that the seed does in fact grow. It grows so big and so large that it actually displaces the town. And the town folk are very upset, but they very much will absolutely benefit from this biggest pratty in the world. And so at the end, they all chip in together to break down the pratty, and they have potatoes to eat. Again, and again and again and again. But yeah, such a great story. And of course, I love the last page with the leprechaun and his gold. Like, but just an adorable story. And I love teaching cause and effect with this story, believe it or not. This story has a lot of great examples of cause and effect. Of course, when you're talking with the wife at the beginning, talking with the leprechaun, and then, the potato actually growing and what effects does that make. And just throughout the story, there's a lot of great examples. So I have put together a printable for you that you can use with the story. It's a cause and effect graphic organizer, and of course one of the two is missing at some point. And so you can go back and forth between each one, and your students can really practice identifying those important cause and effect moments throughout the story. All right, so next one is called Too Many Leprechauns. In the story, there is a young man who comes back to his town after adventuring. He comes back and finds that people are acting very strange. Come to find out that no one has slept in a very long time. And they haven't slept because the leprechauns are making so much noise. So he takes matters into his own hands, and he goes and tries to talk to the leprechauns and figure something out to try and get them to stay quiet so the townspeople can sleep. Well, the leprechauns, of course, they're not very nice, and they don't just give in, right? So he basically has to trick them, and he tricks them by saying that the shoes that they make are not the best shoes that he's ever seen. And so, of course, the leprechauns are very offended, and they keep going out and finding and making more and more shoes. And he keeps saying that, they're not the best ones. So anyways, this keeps going on and on and on. And so the leprechauns are trying to find ways to basically impress this guy. So one of the ways they try to impress him is by piling all of their gold into one spot, right? And so then they're like, are you not impressed by this? Does this not, make you happy? And so they go in, and he said, like, this gold, basically like, yeah, well, leprechauns love their gold so dearly that it might just be their undoing. Perhaps if I saw all of your shoes together, I would change my mind. So he kind of takes it back to the shoes, and the leprechauns say, well, of course, we're going to get all the shoes and bring them all together. And so then the next morning, they get all their shoes, and they're piling them all up, again, trying to impress this man. And in the meantime, I bet you can guess what happens. The man takes the gold. And so all the leprechauns are searching for the gold, and they come back to the man's house demanding the gold back. And he makes a deal with them. He says, if you promise to leave town, I promise to give you your gold back. And so they agree, and he then puts the gold at the end of the rainbow and says that wherever the rainbow is, that's where the gold will be from now on. So it makes the leprechauns have to move around where the rainbow is. So for this one, Too Many Leprechauns, I would use it to teach making inferences. There's so many opportunities throughout the story to make lots of inferences. So I went through for you already, and I made each inference into a question. I definitely think your students will absolutely love that. I have 3 more books to share with you. We're going to go on to the next one and talk about Fiona's luck. Basically, the story is about the land of Ireland and how it used to be completely run by leprechauns. And then one day, the humans came. And then all around, you can maybe see this in the picture, but all around were all these little stars or specks. That's their luck. And so it basically kind of got absorbed, into the bodies, into the land, into things that they were doing. And that's where they got their luck. So when the humans came, the leprechauns were nervous that they were going to take their luck. So the leprechauns in the middle of the night went and stole all of the luck from the land. And so if you can imagine what happened when that took place, everything basically went downhill for the humans. They couldn't plant crops. They can't get milk from their cows. They basically can't live. They're, hungry and poor and just famished because there is no luck at all. Well, enter Miss Fiona, and she decides to take matters into her own hands. And so she knows that there is a leprechaun king out there who is basically hoarding all of this luck. So she pretends to make her own luck to try to get the attention of the leprechaun king. So she takes white paint and pretends it's milk and brags to all the town folk that she has the best cow that produces so much milk. She takes pine cones and hides them in her egg basket and pretends that her hens or her chickens are actually producing eggs when everyone else's are not, and again brags. Well, all of this bragging definitely gets the attention of the leprechaun king. So all of the leprechauns come and find her and ask her to come down to talk to the king. The king is very mad because he thinks somehow she has gotten a hold of luck that she does not deserve. So she makes a deal with the leprechaun king that to basically proves that she doesn't have any luck at all, that she was lying the whole time. And he, of course, does not believe her. So he takes her through these series of tests to prove whether or not she has luck and goes to show that she does not have any. Because she didn't, or because she told the truth, he has to grant her a wish. But the wish is for the amount of luck of which she had. And because she had no luck, the leprechaun thinks he won. Still, even though he has to grant her a wish, it's in the amount of nothing. So Fiona, being the smart, witty person that she is, she wishes for a hole. And a hole is nothing, right? It's just empty air. But she wishes for the hole in the top of the chest, which is where he is housing all of the luck. And all of the luck comes back out and then makes the land a beautiful place once again for everyone in Ireland. I also love to talk about this one with summarizing because it has a fantastic plot where the problem is in detail. There's so much detail to the problem, and then there are so many steps to the solution that the summary is fantastic to focus on. So I made a cute little 4-leaf clover graphic organizer for you where you can focus on the somebody wanted but so then strategy to really let your kids dive in and create their summary on the story Fiona's Luck. The next one is called The Leprechauns Gold. What happens in this story is there are two characters. There's Old Pat and Young Tom. Old Pat, who you see on the cover here, he is an old man who is very, very well skilled on the harp. And he teaches young Tom everything he knows about the harp. Well, the king then hosts a harp contest to show the finest harp skills in all of Ireland. And so, of course, Old Pat and young Tom both enter. Well, that makes young Tom very upset, and he thinks that Old Pat has nothing to do with being in this contest and that he is so much better than the old man. So they both set off on the journey to the king, and young Tom comes up with a plan to basically make sure Old Pat doesn't even get there. So he ends up, they both end up on the journey together. The old man stumbles upon a leprechaun, and the leprechaun is in peril. He helps out the leprechaun and brings him back to camp. Well, when he does that, the leprechaun grants him a wish, and the old man says, you know what, I don't need a wish granted, like I helped you because that's what, we're supposed to do basically, because he's such a nice man. And at that point, when they get back to camp, they also realize that young Tom has gone away. So they lay by the campfire, not a big deal, etc. So then when they get to the kingdom, young Tom goes to play and finds out that all of his strings break, and he does a horrible job. And then Old Pat reaches in his bag for his harp and finds that it's made of gold. Since he did not take the wish, the leprechauns made his harp full of gold, and that of course makes him even better harpist, and he is the one to win the contest and becomes the best harpist in the land. It's a super cute story, but I love it because there's a great compare and contrast between the two characters. You have an obvious good character and an obvious character who makes very poor choices. So comparing and contrasting them is a super fun activity to do after you read the story. So I put together a quick little double bubble for you with Old Pat and Young Tom in the center where they can compare and contrast the two characters. Your last one tonight is O'Sullivan's Stew. O'Sullivan's Stew is a story about this young girl in Ireland who goes to the king's castle to save a horse. The horse was stolen by the king's men from a witch who lives in her village. And after the horse is stolen, the witch is so upset that basically all these bad things happen in her town. So she decides to take it upon herself and her brothers, and they go off to the kingdom to try to steal back the horse to make the witch happier so the bad things stop happening. Well, they get caught. And the king makes a deal with them that if she can convince the king that each one of them has been in a worse situation than they are in right now, if she can convince him that they have each been in a situation worse than they are, he will release each person back. So the character, 𝗦ci𝗰𝗶, is a storyteller, and she goes in to a detailed story about each one of her brothers. And these stories are so in-depth and so detailed. But what makes it confusing, like I was saying, is that this entire story almost has like 2 or 3 smaller stories inside it. So that's why it can be a little bit confusing, especially for your younger readers, because it's not a typical story structure. You've got an overarching story structure, and then inside your story are like 2 or 3 smaller stories that are told by Kate. In the end, Kate does convince the king that they've all had it worse at another point in time. They end up getting the horse back. The king is so impressed by Kate that they give the horse back, they let everyone go, and Kate saves the day. I love teaching this one for plot. And the reason being because it has such a unique plot that this is definitely one to dive into and talk about story structure and how it compares and contrasts to other typical stories that we read. So I put together a quick little graphic organizer because there's so much to deduce from this story that I want my students to really understand what is important here to the story and what's interesting. And because there's so much information, this is definitely needed when it comes to organizing this information for them to really get a good grasp on the true plot of the story. Thank you so much for joining tonight. I hope you grabbed a new story or two. Let me know below which one you are excited to read to your class. I want to know, which one are you going to try first? Thank you so much for joining. I hope you have an amazing day. And if I don't talk to you before then, happy St. Patrick's Day. Have a great March. Have a great week. Have a great night. Thank you so much. Bye.